Brady Ackerman, sideline reporter for the Gator Sports Network. Also, you can hear him on Florida Sports Talk, the team down there in the state of Florida. And Brady, seems like we do this a lot, right? Alabama, Florida, SEC championship game, rinse, wash, repeat.
Yeah, well, that's the way it's supposed to be. I don't know if it's going to be one of the classic Florida-Alabama games that we've seen. Sure has the feeling of that first one where Alabama was a heavy favorite. But, this is the level of expectation for Florida. This is where they want to be. You'd much rather get there being a stronger team, but if you're in a weak division, you don't want to not get there because then you're really bad. So I think Florida's done a nice job the first 2 years under Jim McElwain to get there. I think it helps Florida with recruiting, contrary to what my Florida State listeners and fans believe. I think everyone in America is recruiting against Alabama, and until you can get more guys like they have, it doesn't matter if you beat Florida State because you're not going to win the league, and that's the goal. The number one goal for Florida is to win the league. They got a chance Saturday, albeit a small chance, but they got a chance.
I was going to ask you about that, Brady. Among the fan base, though, and I think you're right, by the way, it's always about winning championships, or it should be. But we asked the same kind of question around here before Alabama played Auburn. The fan base, which more important to you, beating Auburn or winning an SEC championship? And it's amazing how many people go with that rivalry game as being most important. Is that still kind of the sense, even with Florida and as it relates to Florida State? And is that maybe Mac's biggest issue right now? He's now 0-2 against the Seminoles, and is some of the noise more just the vocal minority, or is there more of a split right now with that fan base?
Well, I think there's a little bit of a vocal minority. I think that's every program. First of all, I would not compare Florida State rivalry to Auburn, Alabama. Having coached in that state and lived there, there's nothing like it. So I certainly can respect the fact that rivalry, a win in that might mean more. But objectively, championships mean more. And I'd like to see Florida State's not even a conference game. Alabama, Auburn at least has something on the line with regards to the league. And I've said for years, the only guy that agrees with me is Steve Spurrier that this game should be played at the beginning of the year. Florida should be playing Tennessee last weekend. Florida should be playing, the way Kentucky's playing, they should have been playing Kentucky. I think the league needs to play league games leading up to the conference championship. That's just what I believe in. But that's not going to change, and that's not an excuse for why Florida lost. I think Mac's hearing some, you lose 4 in a row, even though 2 are yours, fans get a little restless. And I think also fans know it's very unlikely that they beat Alabama. Vegas certainly thinks they have no shot at beating Alabama. So you'd rather have that win last week, knowing you're going to lose this week, to try to end that rivalry. And, Jimbo Fisher and the Florida State people are putting out those numbers that they've racked up the last 5 or 6 years against in-state opponents, and Florida hasn't beaten them since 2012. So it's become a red-letter game next year for Florida, I believe, for McElwain, because people are going to bring it up. And I could tell he was very upset with the performance Saturday. I think he was embarrassed by it a little bit because he's more than he's going to put a better product out there than what we saw on Saturday night. But, again, at the end of the day, Tennessee, Georgia, and LSU are bigger games. It's just the way we've evolved. And if you want to play for a championship and you want to play in the Final Four someday, you got to win those games. And so, but it'll be a big game next year for the reasons that you said, because he's lost 2 in a row and fans are getting a little restless.
Do the people down there understand, though, Brady, what this guy has had to deal with in his 2 years as the head coach at Florida? The Will Grier suspension. Now think about Will. Let's talk about Will Grier and how that impacted this program. Not just last year, Brady, but I'm sure you've thought about what might have been if Grier continues to improve and stays in the program and eligible, and what it could have meant for this year's team, right?
Oh, and there's no question. And I kind of think of, the great Florida coaches, all right? Spurrier walked in here and had Shane Matthews, all right? Urban Meyer walked in and had Chris Leak. Then he went to Ohio State and had Braxton Miller, on top of having Alex Smith at Utah. And so the quarterback's the quickest way to get you to the top. You see these teams that have 2 or 3 years. Now, it's a little different than the way Saban built it. But everywhere else today in college football, if you walk into a situation with a good quarterback situation, you're automatically, going to be a contender. I mean, you can do it really quick. If Will Greer is here and doing the things that it needs to be a starting quarterback, first of all, I think Florida runs the table to the Alabama game last year. And I think Florida's in the same spot in Atlanta this year, but probably with a chance with a win over Bama to get into the playoff. And I just, what can you do? Since then, it's just been a myriad of guys that have rolled through the turnstile. We thought it'd be better. I believed it would be better.
I thought Del Rio would be fine.
Yeah,
I really did.
Yeah, well, in essence, what we didn't know is that, number one, after he got injured, he was never the same kid. I could tell you he would not step into his throws. Everything was off the back foot. He just didn't have the same confidence after getting injured against North Texas. And then on top of that, we find out he's playing with a bum shoulder, and kind of that same scenario that they went through with Auburn, where a guy's trying to help his team win, but he would be better off being honest with the coaches and the trainers. So ultimately, that's where we're at, and we're too deep into the season to play a freshman. So here we go. Austin Appleby's your guy Saturday, and yes, the fans are not happy with it. They understand it, but they feel like it's just an extension of Will Muschamp, although he didn't get to Atlanta. So I can sense why McElwain's frustrated with the fan base, whether it's a minority or not. But I think, he made a very good point yesterday. Travis said he was brought here to go to Atlanta, and it's 2 for 2. And that's, you can't ever take that for granted.
I thought that was a nice mic dropper from Mac in response to a lot of the noise right now. Now, last year's game, Brady, between these two teams, at least you went into it knowing that Florida defensively had enough frontline guys that would be on the field to give Florida a chance, more so than anything else, to stay competitive for 4 quarters in the football game. But for me, that's where the biggest problem comes in right now. We can talk about quarterback. We can talk about the injuries on the offensive line. But Florida right now defensively just doesn't seem to have enough guys, their best guys, to hold it together.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. That group last year hung in there, and I think this is a better Alabama offense. I know they had the Heisman Trophy winner last year, but I think it's going to be even more difficult to defend. I'm not saying personnel-wise, but I just think the freshman quarterback is going to be dynamic. So, what you look at it with Florida, they hope to get Brian Cox back. I wouldn't rule Jared Davis completely out. Kylan Johnson, number 28, who played last week, really struggled against Dalvin Cook. Really struggled last week after playing decent against LSU. 33, David Reese is pretty good. Obviously, you don't have Anzalone. So you got those two guys out. Your 2 linebackers out. Marcus May out. But Marcel Harris just played very well. And you know this, Travis, sometimes you find guys that are really good. They're just playing behind a bunch of NFL guys.
Yeah,
Marcel Harris is really good.
Right.
I mean, he's only played behind Keanu Neal, Marcus May, and all these guys are going to the NFL. So I don't feel like there's much of a drop-off in that standpoint. The secondary, I think, is fine. The D-line's good. They should get Cox back. C.C. Jefferson's fine.
Brantley
will play Sherritt. Yeah, Brantley's really good. The problem is they wear down. I mean, you can only send them out there with no points for so long before they wear down. I think they'll play well early. I think they'll come out with some juice. But if the offense can't make first downs, if they look like Auburn's offense, it'll get sideways quicker than last week did, because I don't, like you said, they don't have enough depth. They don't have enough talent, especially at that linebacker position, I think, to hang in there for a long period of time. So they're going to need some help.
As someone who spent a lot of time around Mac here and saw what he did here, you can see it. I mean, you can see what he's trying to do at Florida. It's just been, in my opinion, more of a situation of just not having enough guys yet to really pull it off in the areas where you have to have it. Now, keeping it with Mac as we let you go, Brady, some rumors, I guess you could just qualify him as, out there in relation to perhaps Mac and Oregon. Do you put anything into those, or do you think those are mostly media-driven? Do you think maybe his representation is floating some things right now?
Well, my guess, and you know this business as well as I do, Travis, and I know a lot of coaches, that's representation driven. I mean, it's a salvo to those Gator fans that feel
that's
like
what I think. Yeah,
they
shut
don't.
them up.
You don't want this guy. You don't like this.
Take their temperature, Brady. Take the temperature and find out where you're at.
Yeah, I mean, let me just say this. If I'm recruiting, real quickly, if I'm recruiting Travis Ryer, the I-back at Oklahoma Middle Christian School, who just went for 3,000 yards, and I said, Travis, forget it. You can fly 3 hours west or 3 hours east. I want you to come see my facilities west and then go see my facilities east. Guess which one has better facilities?
Yeah, they do. They do. You're right. That Nike money, it spends real good up there. And you know, we've talked about this before. I was down at UF about 14 months ago. And I was really surprised, Brady. And I know that they've made big strides or doing that with the indoor facility and some other stuff. But seeing what Florida was at 14 months ago, facility-wise, I could only imagine what was going through Mac's mind because he's been here. He knows what he's recruiting against here, much less everywhere else. So I think that's a great point. He's trying to get it built.
That's the thing the fans don't see, Travis, real quick. Is they don't see what he's doing behind closed doors to get those facilities built. And he's trying to build Florida for the future to be able to compete with Alabama year in and year out.
Absolutely. Well, Brady, look forward to hopefully catching up with you Saturday. Have a safe trip up to Atlanta. And as always, great stuff. And really appreciate you being with us.
All right. Thanks for having me on.